Live. We're going live on YouTube too, baby. We'll get a few. Maybe Daniela can monitor YouTube comments or something. Okay. Sorry, folks. We are setting up the webinar. And done. Redirecting to YouTube. Sorry, folks. We are setting up. Now I'm wondering if can somebody else, I'm going to X out of YouTube, right? I don't need to be in YouTube.
Well, maybe we should have some
Daniela or somebody, can you give me a WhatsApp if it's okay on YouTube? I'm going to kill mine. Oh yeah, there's people. I can watch our webinar on YouTube. Only I'm going to close it and assume that we're okay. So now, good morning from Australia. I'm going to record, and here we go. Uno, dos, tres. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 2020 year forecast with myself, special guest Rick Levine, and the entire dream team. It's, as you know, and I'm sure as you feel, the energy is building, and 2020 is looking to be quite the amazing year for evolutionary growth. And so we want to today look at just what evolutionary growth looks like. So we are also going to share with you our excitement for everything that is coming, and offer you opportunities and raffle prizes, raffle tickets, and just, yeah, the whole thing is, this is our year-end astrological giveaway, you know, because that's what we're into, is spreading the astrological word, the word of astrology. Why don't you, maybe all of us can come on and just give a quick hello. I'll put it on speaker view and just say, I bet everybody knows who you guys are.
Hey.
Hi.
Uh-oh, I don't hear you. I don't hear any of you guys.
Good morning. Hello, everyone.
Why don't I hear you guys?
Yeah. Well, I hear everyone, but you don't hear
You
nobody.
guys hear each other? You hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I turned my sound off because I was on YouTube. Okay, let's just get off. And Rick, go for it, buddy. Start us off.
Oh my God. So here we go. Well, first of all, I'd like to give a slight disclaimer. As some of you know, I am here in Bali, which means it's 4 o'clock in the morning for me. So this is not my regular lecture time, but we'll give it a go. And I am so excited about 2020 and about Costa Rica and about being a raffle prize, a reading with me. The thing that I want to talk about today, though, is about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And of course, this is something that astrologers have been talking about for a long time. Most of the astrologers I know have been talking about the Saturn-Pluto cycle since the last Saturn-Pluto opposition in the fall of 2001, when we had this little thing that we refer to as the World Trade Tower bombing. But I want to put it in a little bit of a perspective, because the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in mid-January, actually it's exact on January 12, or depending on where you are on the planet, even though it happens in the first couple of weeks of the new year, it really sets the tone for the entire year. And that's what's important. And the fact of the matter is, when we look back in history at the Saturn Pluto cycle, we realize that the major events that we associate with the Saturn Pluto cycle do not necessarily happen on the day that Saturn and Pluto are exactly conjunct or squared or opposed. And what I did when I began to do this research is I basically isolated the fact that Saturn and Pluto join up, almost like the moon catches up with the sun once a month. Saturn catches up with Pluto 3 times a century. And in fact, it varies because Pluto, of all the planets, has the greatest variance in its speed because its orbit is so elliptical. So when Pluto moves really fast, it takes Saturn longer to catch up to it for the next conjunction. And in fact, the last conjunction was in 1982, and this one being in 2020. That's 38 years between the two conjunctions, whereas the average is more like about 33 or 34 years. So the deal is that that most of us do astrology about people. Evolutionary astrology is basically a soul-based, oriented astrology where we're looking at the trajectory of the soul's development through many lifetimes. But the important consideration is, like planetary cycles affect the affairs of individuals, of you and me, and it's true, even Kaypacha. So do the planets inform cultural affairs, and they impact the rise and the fall of civilizations, and even the evolution of ideas and technology. And this is a very interesting jump to make, and it's one that is very significant. Now, our partner in crime, Rick Tarnas, wrote a book called Cosmos and Psyche, which is an encyclopedic look at the history, the intellectual history of humankind, and looks at some of the planetary cycles, the slow-moving planetary cycles. And Rick Tarnas writes of the Saturn-Pluto cycle that these mark, quote, especially challenging historical periods marked by a pervasive quality of intense contraction, that would be Saturn, eras of international crisis and conflict, empowerment of reactionary forces and totalitarian impulses, organized violence, oppression, and all marked by a lasting traumatic effect. Now, that's a mouthful. And the question is, do the events actually fulfill that imagery? The thing is that Saturn is the planet of boundary. Saturn is the outward bound. It is the circumference. To the ancients, there was nothing beyond Saturn. Saturn was the limit. And the cycle of Saturn and Pluto together creates a rhythm of boundary creation, that would be Saturn, boundary destruction, that would be Pluto, and the subsequent adjustment and adaptation to the brushing up of these boundaries against one another. Now, what I did in my first round of research, though, about 20 some odd years ago, I had my computer program calculate out the exact conjunctions and oppositions for Saturn and Pluto for the last 2,500 years. And then I put them in a spreadsheet. And then because Saturn and Pluto join up every, let's say, 35 years approximately, that means the halfway point of that 35-year cycle, the halfway point is about 16, 17, 18 years. And I looked at the new moons and full moons, actually the new Saturns and full Saturns compared to Pluto, so that I picked the dates of every time Saturn opposed or conjuncted Pluto. And I gave it a year on either side, and I threw my net in the water and I decided what is going to come up. And I was shocked and astounded when I realized how many events that are significant historical events that are brought up in, excuse me, in this particular net. And I just want to touch on a few of them. It's way more than I can share in 10 or 15 minutes. But I just want to put the World Trade Tower bombing into perspective. And, during that, basically, depending upon where you fall in the belief of what actually happened that day, regardless, there were a few thousand people killed, and a few buildings were bombed. Now, I'm not, excuse me, I'm not minimizing this, but I just want to compare this. I want to compare this to the Saturn-Pluto opposition on February 11th, 532, when Emperor Justinian put down a tax revolt in Constantinople, that would be Istanbul today. And his imperial troops basically surrounded a sports arena where there was a major event going on. And to show the people that he meant business, they killed 35,000 people in one afternoon. And this wasn't done by poison gas or by bomb or by machine gun fire. It was done one at a time by bludgeoning, cutting, whatever. And 35,000 people in an afternoon. Now, this is the kind of intensity that occurs with Saturn and Pluto. But I'll give you just a couple of other examples. For example, the whole religious battle thing that's been going on between the Jews and the Christians, the Muslims and the Hindus, the Jews and the Muslims and the wait, let's get this right. The Jews and the Christians and the Hindus and the Muslims. It's like everyone has been battling everyone in these long repetitive cycles. And I just want to take a quick stop in October of 629, when there was a Saturn-Pluto opposition and Muhammad declared Mecca the state of Islam. Now, the weird thing is that that was in 629, nearly a century later, at the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Cancer, the Arabs invaded Spain. That was in July of 710. This is called the Moorish invasion of Spain, where the Arabs basically pretty much ruled Spain from 710 all the way to 1284. That's that's like 5 centuries. And on a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 1284, the Christians basically kicked the Arabs, the Muslims, out of Spain and basically reclaimed it. Now, I'm just trying to point out how these events seem to recycle over long periods of time. And this is a very magical thing about astrology. Another example, and I could just give you like many, is that in 1834, at a Saturn-Pluto opposition, and my research has basically shown that historically Saturn-Pluto conjunctions and oppositions, they're really immaterial which. They both elicit the same kind of energy. But at the Saturn-Pluto opposition in September of 1834, the British Parliament abolished slavery throughout the entire British Empire. That actually was a couple months before, in July of it was actually in July of 1833 that the actual abolition was passed. But the crazy thing is that at the next Saturn-Pluto opposition in 1866, that's when the US government, after the Civil War, passed the 13th Amendment. And if that's not crazy enough, then at the Saturn-Pluto opposition in 1965, that's when the US Civil Rights Act was passed. So it's not all bad stuff that happens, but it's stuff that shows the bouncing about of what happens when systems clash. There's a word that we all know, the word is synchronicity, but I want to introduce another word that's called diachronicity. Synchronicity is when two things happen at the same moment and they're somehow connected. Diachronicity is when two things happen across time and are somehow connected. And a good example of diachronicity is simply tracking the Saturn cycles in an individual's life and looking at when Saturn conjuncts a person's moon and then squares it 7 years later, and then opposes it 7.5 years later, and then squares it and then conjuncts it again. And you follow this rhythm all the way around, and you look at the events that happened in the person's life and you realize they're all connected. Well, as an astrologer, we all know that events are connected in time, but they're connected diachronically. And I just want to give you a couple of weird examples of diachronic threads in astrology. And I think, and the first one was the appearance of Mecca as the political state of Islam, followed by the Moorish invasion of Spain, followed by the Christians, retaking Spain, all on Saturn-Pluto events. But there's other threads that are just crazy when we look at it. For example, at the conjunction in 1883, Britain occupied Egypt to protect the Suez Canal, and that was the year that the Europeans divided up Africa, 1883. At the opposition in 1898, that's when the World Zionist Organization was founded. Now we jump to the conjunction in 1914 that happened within a week of the shot being fired that started World War I. But what happened also in that period of time was Lawrence of Arabia basically got all the Arabs to fight on the side of the Allies, promising them that they would be protected from Turkish rule, from the Ottomans in the future. That was great until the opposition in 1831, which is the opening scenes in the book Exodus and in the movie Exodus, where Britain declares martial law because they'd promised to protect the Palestinians from external rule, but now the Zionists had moved in, and so the Brits didn't know what to do. Then we jump to the conjunction in 1947, and of course the UN was formed in 46, but in 48, Palestine disappears and Israel is created. At the next opposition in 1965, that was within a year and a half of the Six-Day War, and this was, Israeli tension. And then at the opposition in 1982, that was the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, which brings us to the opposition in 2011, which was the World Trade Tower bombing. Now, that's just a crazy string, but there's one other I want to hit because I know my time is probably up. But the other thread that I just want to do very quickly, just to show you how crazy these threads are, these diachronic threads, is that in 1898, Gandhi spent most of the year in jail in South Africa. These are the opening parts of the movie Gandhi. 1898 was a Saturn-Pluto opposition. At the next opposition in 1931, Gandhi spends the year in jail again. This was the Salt March that Gandhi led to the sea, where they boiled salt water. They made salt and therefore avoided paying taxes to the Brits. Gandhi spends the year in jail, 1931 opposition. Within a week of the conjunction in 1947, India and Pakistan were granted independence and they were partitioned. But we Westerners forget that when they were partitioned, there was battles over who controlled Kashmir, and these battles were largely between the Muslims and the Hindus. And in fact, upwards to 500,000 people were killed as a result of India getting its freedom. Now, that would be all part of the same thread, but at the next conjunction in 1982, that was the year the movie Gandhi came out. You can't make it up this crazy. Now, what does this mean for what's coming up in January of 2020? I would caution us to put the date at January of 2020. We're really already in this phase, and it will take us all the way through the end of January 20. I'm sorry, all the way through the end of 2020 and on into 2021. But it doesn't take being very smart or being an astrologer to realize that what's been going on has to come to an end, that there are certain things that if we're going to maintain our place on the planet, things have to change. And I think we're seeing a lot of those things around the world, politically, economically, socially, culturally, even in individual relationships, build up to a heightened point, and we're going to see some of those come to a head. So that's my little opening volley, just food for thought. I think everyone else will take this in a number of different directions. 2020 is certainly going to be a profound year. I would encourage everyone to keep 2020 vision, and that is to see as best we can into the distance and beyond 2020, because things will go on beyond 2020, but this is certainly a turning point. And I can't wait until May, when we all get together and have a week of amazing astrology. I was blessed to be at the first Astrology Rising. It was an experience to be remembered, and I'm sure this next one will be also. Back to you, boss man Kaypacha.
I'll take it. Thank you, Rick.
Well, then I'm happy to have been an opening act for Ari Moshe, who is in some ways picking up where I left off.
Yeah,
Take it
that's
away.
beautiful. Thank you. I love this idea of diachronicity.
Dia means across. It's
Chronos. Yeah.
Diachronos, across time.
So, when we all talk about Saturn, anything Saturn, we're encompassing the idea of time and structure and form. And there's something for us to all appreciate, that time, form, structure, boundaries, these are things that we work with. They're manifestations arising within consciousness, but they're not original. They're not primary. They do not represent the source. And that our entire time-based experience within our life, within our being, is an experience. And there's this beautiful quote from A Course in Miracles that I want to start with. I've been meditating on this, and I'll read the quote for you. The purpose of time is to enable you to learn how to use time constructively. I'll say that again. The purpose of time is to enable you to learn how to use time constructively. It is thus a teaching device and a means to an end. Time will cease when it no longer is useful in facilitating learning. Time is a teaching device and a means to an end. We are so often so identified and conditioned by our time-based reality, our roles, our responsibilities, and just for most human beings, there's like an undercurrent pressure and construct that says, okay, well, my experience of this present moment in some way is being defined and conditioned by this internal sense of, I got to pay the bills, I have to be here at a certain time. There are these things that I got to figure out in life. In a way, the suffering that many of us experience is this binding within time, that our sense of self, our identity, our experience of the present moment is so often covered by this really thick and strong awareness of time and who we are to be within it. And as we grow spiritually, as we mature, we're all learning how to stand on our own 2 feet, so to speak. We're all learning how to consciously engage in this world in a way that is true for our own soul journey, which means we're learning how to use time. We're learning how to say, okay, what am I going to do with myself? What habits, what patterns am I going to condition? Because we become aware of the fact that the mind is incredibly malleable. The mind is incredibly fluid and ready to be shaped. but it requires our conscious participation and awareness. We first become aware of what are the patterns and the habits that I've created, which means what are the ways that I'm existing within time and space? And is this getting me where I want to go? And in cultivating this awareness, we really set ourselves at a 0 point, a foundation where we can authentically ask ourselves, what are we here for? What is our own soul directive? Right? And when we look at Pluto in transit, when we look at Pluto in our own chart, we're looking at the idea of soul directive. That as souls, as timeless beings, beings that are not defined inherently by time, we incarnate, we're coming into this reality to use time for our own purposes. And it takes a lot of self-awareness and fervent devotion and interest in really knowing ourselves and really evolving and really doing what it takes to grow, to evolve. And a lot of spiritual teachers have said that the path to happiness is to earnestly desire to know what we are here to do, what Creator wishes of us, and to do it, right? All the other things that we seek for happiness, all the different ideas of if I am this, or if I get this, or if I'm recognized in this way, they don't necessarily provide the deeper contentment that is within our own soul, but knowing who we are and what we're here for. So all of this is an introduction for me to speak about Pluto and Saturn from another perspective now. We have these planets coming together, and from a spiritual, psychological point of view, what this represents for everyone on this planet is we're entering into a new phase of relationship where it is upon ourselves to walk this path and become more empowered and aware of ourselves. And there's something to be really aware of when it comes to this transit. So I want to share this chart for a moment. Here's a chart of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction on January 12th. And what I'm wanting to point out is, as Rick said, this conjunction is happening right now, right? The difference between now and after the 12th of January is Saturn and Pluto enter a new phase. And this is important. This is a significant thing to understand. When a planet enters a new phase, which means when Saturn passes Pluto and now it's beginning to separate, right? It's had that conjunction, that meeting. Now they're moving beyond. When planets enter a new phase, an analogy can be before the new phase, they're smelling each other. They're approaching each other, right? You meet someone and you haven't dated them yet, or you're dating, but you haven't, married yet. Right? There's some sort of relationship. They're connected. They're aware of each other. There's an unfolding, but a lot of other developments are kind of falling away. Something's being prepared for this new cycle. And like what Rick said as well, this new cycle happens. It's a consummation, but it's not necessarily all of the fireworks right away. But what it represents is the new conjunction is that moment within time where these two forces are now here together, right? So it's like you're smelling the food, but then you bite it. You're producing the enzymes. It's actually in your mouth. There's no going back, right? It'll take some time to digest it, to experience the consequences of whatever you just bit. But once that conjunction happens, it's important to understand that there is a threshold that has been crossed, right? So we can feel that right now energetically, that we're in this threshold time. We're about to enter into this turning point. And it'll take a lot of time for us to become aware of what's wanting to change, what's potentiated in this time. Where can we develop greater courage and skill and strength? So Saturn is strength. Wherever we have Saturn is where we have the opportunity to cultivate more strength. And what is strength all about? It corresponds to a quality of resilience and stamina to be aligned and present for life experience with one's inner reference in one's own inner authority. standing and present to life, whatever it is. If you have a family, if you have a job, if you have a body, holding relationship to all of this with a sense of inner authority, choosing. How am I choosing to create and shape my world? And there's a calling for compassion, because as per our conditioning, none of us are 100% aware of where we're conditioned by patterns that have been ingrained for many, many years and lifetimes. And so this new phase represents a new cycle, a new journey of cultivating strength, learning our agency, remembering our capacity to engage consciously in this world and shape and mold. I'll share one more piece here. As we understand that time is to be used, we become less victimized by it, right? We become more curious about our circumstances and what's possible, where we can grow, where we can become more aware. When we really orient ourselves in the seat of conscious growth, conscious change, we become more curious and open to what we can learn in each experience. And in that sense, our breath is something that we can use as well. Learning how to use time, learning how to use structure, also means learning how to use breath. And I like to offer that perspective that we are learning how to use breath as a tool in the same way that a dancer is using their body consciously, right? In the same way that you are consciously crafting words when you express exactly what it is that you are wishing to convey according to your intentions. To know our power as creators is to go slow, to remember that we're just starting. We are all beginners. And to always remember that our breath is something that we can use and we can learn from where we are. So many blessings to all of us in this new phase. We're doing this together, and so Saturn moves into Aquarius, and then it goes back into Capricorn. So 2020 is one heck of a year. A lot is shaking up, a lot is changing. And then it's just going to continue. The next few years are absolutely going to see a lot of significant changes collectively, politically, socially. So we need to be together. We need to understand that we're doing this together, and never to get stuck in the idea of being in a vacuum, because that's not true. And I think Saturn and Aquarius will really be teaching us this as well, that we need to appreciate that we're here together. Okay, so I'll end there. Couple little points. We're doing this raffle thing. So I want to just let you know, if you buy this raffle ticket, you're going to get a whole lot of gifts, a little bit of mine. You have a session from me. 2 of my workshops are being offered on the elements, on the planets, and also I think it's a $250 value to one of my upcoming community chart interpretation classes. So check it out. Definitely get a ticket. All right. I am passing it on to who? I forgot.
To
Soul.
me. Yeah. Hello. Let's put on the video. Hi, everybody. And thank you very much, Ari. That was so interesting and so profound. And Rick, too, you sort of brought in both the mundane and the personal, which I think is really important in this time and age where we are so interconnected. We are so connected to each other for better and worse. It's demanding quite a lot of us because we need to keep balance. We have to find some balance with this growing global community and this growing global awareness. And it is not always easy to keep track of everything that's happening. And it's really quite a big toll on the emotional body. You get all these news and it's happening all so quickly. And we are going into such a interesting new phase with this internet. If we go back in time from the last time Saturn was in Aquarius, and it will be in Aquarius from March 22nd this year, go back to Capricorn, as Ari mentioned, July 2nd, and then move on full throttle ahead. end of December, and then will join Jupiter for a new conjunction in December and stay in Aquarius up until March 2023. And the last time it was in Aquarius, back in the beginning of 1991, it went into Aquarius. We had so many changes happening after Saturn had been a couple of years in Capricorn. It was big changes happening in China. You had the Operation Desert Storm, which really took warfare into the age of technology. The USSR dissolved. The new Russia, if you look at the chart of Russia, it's born with Saturn 5 degrees Aquarius, and the charts of the maps of Europe changed immensely. The EU suddenly started to become a fact, and we saw all these changes, all these new modern alliances pop up. And there was a higher degree of complexity in the world at that time due to also the internet. The first website, for instance, was put out there in 1991. And suddenly, during this period, everybody suddenly had a cell phone. And now, a full Saturn return after, we see a world that's connected through the internet everywhere, which has brought a lot of development in many ways into our lives. We get to connect. And as Ari also mentioned, this is a place, a time in our history where maybe we will understand the benefit of being together as a group, as friends come together, as people with mutual interest come together. And we can do that now, even without leaving our houses. But we also saw the dark side of being so connected. I remember there was a colleague who had a son who once said something very interesting about the internet. He said, never have we been so closely connected, yet so immensely disconnected from each other at the same time. Right now, if you walk out anywhere, you see people, headband, their face is in the phone. They're doing the thing while walking. It is like we're there and here everywhere. It's the need for presence. There's the polarity of Aquarius is Leo, and Leo is about full-on presence, being present in the world, listening, being one with the moment, not always running into the future, although Saturn will also remind us to keep some visions for the future. Right now, when it's going through Capricorn, we will see that our options, we will start maturing, and we will see that, okay, I have to prioritize this, I have to get rid of that, which is also something that comes into Saturn-Pluto. It's that prioritizing your resources. You only have 24 hours a day, and right now time is, it's speeding, it's going so quickly. A lot of us will feel that we're not actually keeping pace. So we have to start prioritizing better. And when Saturn goes into Aquarius, a lot of us also went through a deep ancestral healing. We are leaving behind the nodal axis in Cancer Capricorn, which also, involved a lot of this release from the ancestral lineage, the release from the family karma. As if you did your work in this period, you will probably feel a lot freer. So there's like this aspect of Saturn into Aquarius that has to do with individuation, who you are. Aquarius is about having the courage to step out into the world, being your original self, right? And Saturn is always making that a must. You really have to. And that's one of the good things about the internet, is that we all have the opportunity to express ourselves now. We all have the opportunity to connect with people that we naturally won't have in our close environment. So that also sped up, made it possible for a lot of people to find themselves now than previously. The internet has really caused a huge social revolution in many ways, and it's still only reaching its first Saturn return. According to me, that's how I see it. Saturn into Aquarius and the connection between groups. So that's coming to a full-on maturation cycle now. And you can also appreciate then that maybe now it's time to bring that personal self that you found in this process into the world in a way that is more peaceful. Because once people individuate, there's always this natural resistance towards influences in our environment that wants to condition us. So we need to have that Aries, Martian, no energy with us. And in the beginning of that individuation process, there will be a defense mechanism, a resistance towards cooperation, because the need to have a certain amount of isolation to define who you really are and to establish it firmly requires some peace and quietness away from the world and away from these people who wants to define us. And that's going to be a theme as Saturn is moving through Aquarius. It will dip back into Capricorn again. So there's like maybe a little work that needs to be done on whatever you are still cleaning out and clearing up in your own life. And as it moves into Capricorn again, it's making an incredibly interesting square to Mars. We will hear more about that, I'm sure. Mars going retrograde in Aries. And this is also something that I find really important, because one of the things that separates us as individuals is that we're always very competitive, and we can be very defensive, and we have differing views on things. And that is the things that can definitely break up groups. And I think we will all learn how group dynamics work as Saturn move into Aquarius, is that we can't oppose each other. We have to come out supporting each other despite having different viewpoints at times. And that Saturn is going now through Aquarius, which is archetypally a very mature sign. It's one of the last signs. It's the 11th sign in the zodiac. So there is this kind of movement towards a more detached and mature approach to whatever is going on in the world. I actually associate Saturn in Aquarius with mindfulness, with Buddhism, with all these detachment techniques, so that the drama of the world won't necessarily be something that influences you that much. And that's prioritizing, that's using your time wisely. And then you can free up time to concentrate on your particular missions, on what you bring into the world. And if anything, the internet has made us more conscious of what we put out into the world, for good and bad, what we project, how we listen, if we listen, how we cooperate with people, and how we, what type of behavior we allow ourselves in the world of the internet. And if that's to the benefit of all, or if it's to the detriment of all. So I think, there will be a rise in self-awareness with Saturn going through Aquarius. And what is very important to remember then is that you keep your heart open as well. If the mind gets too much power and we get too detached, we might turn cold and not care about anything. And now that's not the goal of humanity. The goal of humanity is to walk, the talk, and to walk the love, and to show the love. But I think it's very hard as long as we get ourselves into these dramas from time to time. So yeah, so that's my little insight for 2020. It's bound to be an intense year. And as Rick said, yeah, I'm certainly looking forward to get back to Costa Rica in May. And I hope to see a lot of you there, because that's really group work. That's when we get into the groove. Now, who are you when you get involved with a group, huh? It's not easy to stay true to yourself when there's others around, but we need to practice it. And for the raffle, I'll be giving away a healing, a soul flow healing, an asteroid reading, and then it was a progression reading. And so there's 3 readings coming from my end. And yay, I'm so happy, Mandy, you're coming back to Costa Rica. Yoo-hoo, good, that's nice. And I hope to see a lot of you too. Now, who am I giving the torch to? Somebody help me. Oh, Tim, yay, Tim.
Thank you, Sol. Can y'all hear me okay? It's a new mic, I'm getting adjusted to it. I hope that you all are having fun. Yes.
It's a little bit low, Tim,
low?
I think. Can you
right.
turn it up?
How about now? Good.
Sounds kind of the same to me. Anybody else? I don't know. Sorry. Oh, I can't hear you at all now.
Oh, it's probably because I was turning
There.
it the wrong direction. How
Oh,
about now?
better. Yeah. There you go.
Okay, thanks so much. So I hope you all are having a fun time. Yes, by the sounds of things, we're really in the thick of it. And so I'll just sort of jump in by kind of mentioning this sort of overall cyclic theme, as Rick Levine mentioned, we pretty intense period. It's a period of reprioritization, restructuring, a fundamental restructuring in many respects. And in many respects, we can be tapping down in what I would sort of say is a bit of a mini dark age. And there is a intergenerational karma. There is this human history. As Ari Moshe pointed out, there is a part of ourself outside of time. And then there's certainly the aspect of ourself that is deeply in it, resolving these dynamics between the past and the future. It's almost as if humanity is coming up against these collective corks, these collective blocks, and we're seeing these blockages in ourselves, in our humanity, in our society, in our human history, and how we've sort of formed these programs from the ground up in terms of expectations and obligations. Now, much of what we're talking about this exciting year of 2020, this Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter conjunctions that are taking place are at the last degrees of Capricorn and entering into Aquarius. And so Sol just gave us a little bit of a heads up. And when we're talking about this Capricorn Aquarius cusp, it's almost as if that cork or these blockages that we're coming up against, it's almost like loading a spring. And when we enter Aquarius, I mean, this next year is really going to kick off this decade that's incredibly revolutionary, incredibly exciting, incredibly pioneering. And as Sol mentioned, there's a fair degree of mastery of our own power complexes, of our own deeper conditioned expectations and obligations. So that way we can function together while we're going through this period. Now, I'm going to be speaking about Jupiter, and Jupiter has just entered the sign of Capricorn as of December 3rd, where he will remain through the 19th of December, 2020. And so this is a year-long transit that has just kicked off. Now, stereotypically, yay, Jupiter, stereotypical people's favorite planet, joyous, illuminate, expansive, the adventurer archetype, absolutely. Jupiter provides that higher vantage point, that higher perspective that can see the glass half full, but also is the higher vantage point of seeing life as if it were a topographical map or from the bird's eye view. Now, this last year of 2019, while Jupiter has been transiting his own sign of Sagittarius, we've been opening up, exploring, surveying our own personal truth, our orientation to the bigger picture, nature, etc. And so we've been at this vantage point, seeing where life is leading us. How can we align with our truth and acknowledge our personal nature? And now, as of December 2nd, officially December 2nd, Jupiter entered the sign of Capricorn. And it's as if he's coming down off that lofty perch, getting down into the ravine, putting his head down and getting to work. It's like we've surveyed the landscape and now we're getting to work assembling the road. And so we're measuring our resources. How much do we have? How much do we have to spend? How much do we have to go of? How much do we have to survive this next winter? And we're laying this road layer by layer, gravel, tar, concrete, step by step. Jupiter in Capricorn is thoroughly practical. The gifts that Jupiter in Capricorn, that vantage point, can provide a structural brilliance, a skeletal type of visionary, like seeing that process. It's like we're going to work. We're the construction crew. We need the base layer. Then we're going to build the skeletal framework. Then we're going to fill that skeletal framework in step by step, material by material. So it's really laying this bare bones framework. And Jupiter in Capricorn is the practical genius that has this type of structural visionary skill and know how to do it. Now, as we mentioned, Jupiter is completing cycles with both Pluto and Saturn this next year of 2020. Saturn-Pluto conjunction, as Rick was sharing, powerful time, tremendous restructuring. Does play out on a global level, particularly in the sign of Capricorn. And with Jupiter joining these new cycles and these planetary conjunctions, it's going to bring that much more attention, that much more awareness, illumination, and expansion to these changes. I mean, this is not likely going to be something we can easily ignore or avoid. In other words, we're entering an extremely political year, an extremely revolutionary period. And Jupiter may even be bringing that necessary magnifying glass or exaggeration to these changes. So that way we can really see these greater trends in humanity, these long outstanding patterns, these intergenerational expectations and obligations. And the real gift that Jupiter can bestow in the sign of Capricorn is the practical, real world ambition that we can do it. Yes, it is challenging. No, it's not all simple, easy, fast solution, quick win type of challenges are not the obstacles that we meet in Capricorn. Jupiter gives us a long-term vision. Okay, we're going to be investing in this area. We'll build this up. That way we can conquer these challenges and honor our long-term goals. And so I like to think of Capricorn as being that real world type of wisdom that is almost, found in the war veteran, who's been there, done it, has faced challenges, has been in the trenches, has survived the trenches. And there's this wisdom that we can get through it. It is possible. And yes, we do have to work. Yes, we do have to be in our three-dimensional bodies. Yes, we do have to be in linear time in order to create the changes, in order to move into a thoroughly new dimension. So it's an extremely exciting year. I'm very honored and excited to be a part of this dream team. I'm very privileged that the dream team is insane enough to keep me around and to be inviting me to Costa Rica for another year. So thank you so much. And in this raffle, I'm very excited and pleased to be giving away an astrology reading from yours truly. I'll also be giving away a year-long subscription to my Patreon page where I do written astrology, extra videos. We do a monthly Q&A session, and I'll also be giving away my polarity workshop. So I look forward to continuing to grow, explore, interact, and discover what it means to be a human being on this planet at this particular time through this very exciting decade to come. And I too have forgotten who I'm handing the torch over to, but thank you for taking over, and thank you all for participating.
Thank you so much, Tim. That is me. I wonder why I'm not coming on. Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you look all good. Perfect.
Oh, really? Okay, I can't seem to see myself. So let me just put my video. Hi, everyone. It's Christina Caudill. And thank you so much for that, Tim, and everyone. It's funny how so many of these transits seem to synthesize and synergize, because I'm here to talk about the nodes moving into Gemini and Aquarius. And I'm hearing so much of an echo, like Ari Moshe saying that we need to learn to use our breath and have beginner's mind. And that is actually one of the things that I've been thinking about that could be a potential of our evolutionary growth as the North Node moves into Gemini, right? It's an air sign. And it's not enough just to follow our curiosity, right? If knowledge is power, we need to be able to use our minds in order to access that knowledge and focus it toward the goal of knowledge. Now, before we even get to that, I want to backtrack a little bit, because the nodes don't actually move into Gemini and Sagittarius until the mid of the year, about May, right? The beginning of May. So we're not done yet with the nodes in Capricorn and Cancer. And I just want to, not rush ahead too much, right? That's a very Gemini thing, that we're still in the evolutionary sort of womb of the North Node in Cancer with the South Node in Capricorn. And over this last year, we've had so many lessons around this, and it's so important to actually integrate what these lessons have been. And they've been pretty vivid with all that's happening in Capricorn, with that Saturn-Pluto conjunction getting tighter, right? Having sort of a tighter grip on our Capricorn archetypes of control, authority, the structures in our society that are decaying, that are dying away. And so it's kind of a beautiful segue that as the nodes move into the North Node in Gemini and the South Node in Sagittarius, we are actually empowered to learn, how does our society work? And in order to be able to be building this new paradigm, as Sewell was mentioning with Saturn coming into Aquarius, we have to be armed with the knowledge that will give us power. And, something that I think we've all noticed is not only in America, but all over the world, when we have these, major political regime changes and we're fighting for the world we want to bring into being, we need to know, first of all, how our laws and society works. And over these past couple of years, a lot of people realized they didn't know how the society works. And I've even seen with in the UK, a lot of people don't even know who has the power. Is it Parliament? Is it the PM? Is it the Queen? And so we actually really have to go back, and there's no shame in not knowing, right? It's actually really empowering to know that, just entering with beginner's mind and not being so rigid with what we think we know, right? When we think we know everything, then we're limiting ourselves. And so when we look at the light and shadow of both of these archetypes of Gemini and Sagittarius, it's really important that we are following our curiosity with Gemini, that we are on a continual search for wisdom with Sagittarius, and that we have enough flexibility so that we can actually grow our minds and grow our souls along with all of these changes that are coming, and they're requiring us to get into action, because it's not enough to just know, right? I mean, as Sewell was saying earlier, is that now with the internet, everyone has a platform to share their voice, right? And as we've seen, in some ways that's a great thing, in some ways not so great, because, just your instinctual, what you think may not be reflective of what is so, of what is the real truth. So this is going on a spiritual quest, right, for all of us. And in the 2020 survival guide that you're going to get, those of you who purchase a $10 ticket, everyone gets a survival guide from all of us that we all put together on the 2020 transits. And I list the light and the shadow of the archetypes of Gemini and Sagittarius, just so we can sort of get a sense of what it may be calling forward for us right? Because in order for us to really truly evolve and be part of this collective evolution, then it helps to consciously be aware of where we're moving forward into. And the other interesting thing is we have the North Node going through Gemini, right? And not a whole lot else happening in Gemini, except there's going to be a Venus retrograde in Gemini, which I believe Jules is going to speak about a little bit later. And so that's really going to have us looking at not only the Gemini archetype, but how it relates with Venus, with our relationships, getting along with other people, right? Whether or not we believe in the same reality, because so much of what we consider ourselves, our identity, and our reality are usually centered around our beliefs, right? We feel like we want to always be around like-minded people. And so it'll be interesting to see what the North Node in Gemini and Venus retrograde will have to say about how that will affect not only our love relationships and who we like, but who we don't like, who we feel connected with and disconnected to. Actually, Venus and the North Node will meet just briefly in late Gemini. I believe it's in early August, right? Venus will be direct at that time. And so, by that time, we'll have had our Venus retrograde lessons. We'll be just sort of entering into the realm of the North Node in Gemini. And so, we're going from, as I said, the emotional realm of the North Node in Cancer, that feminine realm where we've been seeing the balance of feminine and the Capricorn archetype of authority, responsibility, seeing a lot of women rising to positions of power in a feminine way. And then as we shift that to the archetype of Gemini Sagittarius, maybe we'll see more of this not being so polarized between masculine and feminine, right? The archetype of Gemini is sort of neutral, right? So it's not about our gender so much as about what we believe to be true, about the sharpness of our mind, right? And so as we balance that with its polarity of Sagittarius, the Sagittarius is the guru, it's the teacher, it's the higher mind. But the shadow of that is having, this really stiff dogma, right? Where what's right, what's true, but you're not open to more knowledge that could actually maybe change your perspective and change your entire paradigm. So it would be great to see what we all feel about what are some of the lessons, because guess what? We are all teachers and we are all students. And that's going to be even more clear as these nodes enter Gemini and Sagittarius. All right. And I wanted to also just sort of bring up the fact that these are in fire and air, right? So air, as Ari Moshe had said earlier, requires us to connect with the breath, and think about how we communicate. It's more than just what we say, right? It's more even than just the realm of the mind. We communicate through our beingness. And the best way to have more sort of control over that is to return to the breath, and so with Gemini being again an air sign, we need to make sure that we are flowing with air in order for us to have more a flexible mind. And the fire of Sagittarius, that's that enthusiasm, that's that hope for the future, right? We've heard a lot, there's a lot that we can be either fearful of or just concerned about coming ahead, with so many of these massive changes happening. But we can also be enthusiastic as well, that this is a new paradigm that we have not only a responsibility, but we're fortunate, we're privileged to be living in this time. And I love to remind people that the South Node isn't all bad. It's not all negative karma that has to just be chucked out, right? The highest expression is if we can integrate the lessons of the South Node and the North Node. The North Node gives us the sense that there's something beyond that we need to grow into and rise to, and that can be uncomfortable. And sometimes the South Node feels more comfortable. It's where we know more of ourselves to be, and it's part of our karmic path. But there can be lessons there that show us that this is something that needs to be released in order for us to truly grow and expand. I also wanted to just note that at the end of 2020, about late October into November, December, and then early 2021, Neptune will be squaring the nodes, right? Because Neptune in Pisces will form a square to the nodes. And so, whatever we've believed to be true, we're going to have to even more open our hearts and our minds to spiritual wisdom, right? Because there's truth even beyond that's bigger than us, that's bigger than our logical mind. So the mind is more than just, our logical putting together patterns within our mind, but the greater mind, the higher mind, is also calling for us to access as well. All right, so truth versus lies is a huge thing that we've already been seeing coming up in the collective. And it's going to be even more essential that we align with that truth, not get too distracted by so much that is here to distract us. I think we all have had that experience where we've been so distracted by all of these technology things that are meant to distract us and get our attention. And we feel empty when we do that. Right? So using the best of Gemini, which is the knowledge that can arm us with a sense of growth, a sense that we are all evolving together as species, right? Because it's more than just what we're here to do in our own little lives, but how we add and how we evolve in the collective mind. So I also wanted to let you all know, those of you that are coming to Costa Rica, I'll have more to say about Gemini and Sagittarius when we get to Costa Rica. I'll also be doing a rebirthing ceremony, which is, I think, something that we could all really use during this time, just as the nodes shift signs. And for the giveaway, for the raffle, if you buy a ticket, you're entered to win in that huge list. If you all saw all of those awesome prizes that you could potentially win, and the more tickets you buy, the more chances you have to win. And I'll be giving away a 2-hour past life experience session. So that's an hour evolutionary astrology session, and followed by an hour of a past life guided meditation, which is incredibly deep and healing work. I've been fortunate enough to learn some of my techniques from Patricia Walsh, who does her deep memory process. And it's incredibly healing work because we not only take you through the past life, but we also take you through the healing process. And I'm also giving away a 1-year membership to the Radiant Astrology Membership Circle, which is a new circle I've launched this year. Every month we get together for a new moon ceremony. And actually this month we are gathering for the solstice. So we can really put to rest 2019 and open up to the possibilities of 2020. Right? So those are giveaways. And I hope that you all buy your ticket. It's only $10. And again, the more tickets you buy, the more chances you have to win all these awesome prizes. And that's all I have for you today. I hope that you all learned something and got something of value from this talk today. Thank you. And I think I'm handing it over to Jules, I believe.
That's right. Thanks, Christina. You've actually introduced my segment really well with the Gemini node, North nodes, the nodes moving into Gemini and Sagittarius, because I'm going to talk about Venus in Gemini, Venus retrograde in Gemini. As we know, Venus does not retrograde every year as does Mars. She only retrogrades every 19 months. So when a year comes along that Venus does her thing and does the retrograde, we really have to take notice. And I'm coming at the middle of the year she really is kind of pulling in a lot of the qualities and energy, as she always does. Venus is the great attractor, I call her, to, you know, to sort of focus in on things that are happening all throughout the year. So as the year begins with so many new seeding moments, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, Pluto, Ceres, Pluto, you know, there's just so many new seeding moments happening through the year. And we move into a new time, a new paradigm that we have to adjust things, readjust our lives, readjust our thinking, relearn so much about what's going on. And that is Venus retrograde in Gemini. So I'm going to share my screen just so we can kind of look through things, and it keeps me on track pretty much. I'll just got to get my spotlight going. Here we go. So Venus in Gemini, yes, she is going to retrograde from the 13th of May at 21 Gemini back to 5 Gemini on the 25th of June. Now, Venus in Gemini is Venus retrograde on her own north node. So it's almost like the most significant part of a Venus retrograde. Or you know, a Venus retrograde is Venus in Gemini retrograde, okay? And we'll find out more about that as we go. Yeah, the Venus retrograde on her own north node is the Venus star point, so the midpoint of the retrograde time. So the retrograde is about 42 days next year, and as most of us will know, that the retrograde points happen in 5 areas of our astrology charts only at any given time, you know, of a 100-year era. Okay, so the current points are happening in Leo, Gemini, Aries. All my other star points have fallen off. Capricorn and Scorpio. So we don't look for Venus retrogrades anywhere else. That's where they happen. Okay, so we know that Venus retrogrades happen every 8 years in the same place in the charts. So we actually go back to now, when we look at Venus retrogrades, to the years 2012, or retrogrades in Gemini, and 2004, which I'll talk about in a minute. And before we get there, just let's remember what Venus represents. She's not just the relationship goddess that is represented by the ruler of Venus, or just, you know, as the ruler of Taurus, you know, what we want and what we desire and how we live our lives to get the most out of it. But she does represent what we're devoted to as well. Of course, the love and romance of life, the love of life as well. She's also, her metal is copper. And copper, it's good to be reminded that she's the conductor. You know, she's the best conduit to actually connect things. She's very moony because she's in phases as well. So I really see her as connecting the dots in our astrology. And therefore, again, the sort of, the whole essence of the year. She represents specialness in our life. Who's special, what we regard as special. The magical pentacle that she makes in her 5 star points throughout an 8-year cycle. And then a mirror to ourselves, you know, how we like things, how we like ourselves, and so on. So, and then in Gemini, okay, in Gemini, we've got all these words. I just kind of put a background of words there. You can read as many. It is about learning. Gemini is learning. It's almost like developing a new language. I mean, just think about how many things we've learnt since 2004 when Facebook started, right? So many social media started in 2004 with one of the retrogrades in Gemini, okay? And you know, just the words Facebook, Google, you know, all kinds of stuff that is just part of our absolutely, you know, normal vocabulary these days. Okay, so Gemini, new ideas, how we communicate them, who we get on with, all the, you know, a few things that Christina sort of brought up as well in this whole time. I think a new relationship to our neighbourhoods is needed. The way that I've just travelled down from New South Wales coast where all the fires are burning, and the smoke, the air quality is horrendous. It's not going away fast. And I think as we enter 2020, where our minds are so focused on the quality of the air in the sense of climate change. We've got Saturn moving into Aquarius, Venus retrograde in Gemini, and a new Jupiter and Saturn cycle starting in air. A few years later, we've got Pluto going into Aquarius. We have such an air decade ahead, and what we're going to have to, let's say, relearn, rethink about how we get what we like as well is this Venus retrograde in Gemini that almost sets the mood to begin things, okay? So keep those dates in mind. Where's that zone of the retrograde going to happen? And I want you to look back to, again, the last time Venus retrograded there, which was in 2012. And the time before in 2004. And of course, 2004 and 2012 were the Venus transits of Venus going across the face of the sun, which won't happen again now for another 100 years or so, but really significant in the sense of timing of just, again, thinking about how our lives have changed through the significant transits of Venus over in Gemini on her North Node. And again, now we've got a repeat of that. Although it's not a transit, it's going to be a repeat of that. And with Venus, we always look at the half points when she's not retrograde, but she still makes a star point every 4 years in between. So we're looking back at 2016. For America, that's an important time because that was when Trump was running for presidency, and maybe he'll run out this time because it's like Venus is from the opposite side now, you know, from retrograde. When he was running for election, Venus was the outer conjunction point and direct. So a fascinating cycle, of course, the Venus star and how it moves. And these are the two transits of that time. But again, if we're looking at that time, how significant this transit has been to awakening society, new information, all of those things that Gemini represents was this age of awareness, I've been calling it. And again, 2004, 2012 were very big years, or in between that time, even we can have a look. And even since then, you know, how many things have happened, have changed our minds. Eris was discovered, Facebook, YouTube started, all those things, they changed our lives forever. And then moving through the in-between of that period, there was movies that changed our thinking. There was WikiLeaks started, you know, all these Geminian things like let's spread information, let's share, let's do. How much more of that has got to come as well? And so really significantly honing in on this Venus retrograde in Gemini. As Christina mentioned, the Venus retrograde in Gemini is highlighted by there's 3 eclipses around that time, but 2 of them are during the Venus retrograde. And she, as Venus, again, really does connects the dots. During this retrograde, we've got the first eclipse in the Sagittarius Gemini polarity, and the last eclipse, actually, it's not the last eclipse of the Cancer Capricorn polarity, but it's an eclipse at 0 Cancer. So she's bridging the gap of the past and the future, and how we're going to connect it all up together in this time, and really significantly important time. The first eclipse, well, this is the Venus star point at 13 degrees 35 of Gemini. Venus star points move slowly backwards over time, about 2 degrees every time they happen. So from when in 2004, she was about 16 degrees, she's gone to 14 and now 13. And really interestingly, the north node of Uranus is also at 14 Gemini. So we have this connection of this radical change, radical shift in thinking, you know, as part of our sort of way forward. Survival, actually, you know, Saturn, Pluto about survival. This new 2020 is big, the next decade is huge. And then this is the eclipse at 15 Gemini Sagittarius. We can see Venus is still very close to the sun, and again happening on the nodes of Uranus, north and south. And then the 0 sun moon solar eclipse at 0 Cancer on the solstice. Messages abound for, again, redirecting ourselves to what's most important in this world and as a global community. So the current star point that's going to finish with the Venus retrograde started in Scorpio at the retrograde in 2018, was highlighted by the outer star point of Venus in Leo during August this year, and finishes in Gemini. So we can sort of, in a sense, also look at more personally, our timing, you know, what changed last year, and then what might be changing for us as the Gemini star point eventuates, and then the next cycle begins. The red stars represent the retrogrades, and the gold stars are the quick movements behind the sun of the outer point. So now, as Venus actually is an evening star, she's got a lot higher to go in her movement to become the bright star that she's known for over the next few months, and peaking in March next year. So keep looking for Venus for, let's say, confirmation. Talk to her as she's rising as the beautiful evening planet over the next few months, as she takes us then into the next retrograde, which I'm sure, just look back, every 4-year increments for Venus Gemini points to actually get an understanding of what she's been, let's say, what you've been learning through her and with her over your time, you know, in these increments. She actually is a really good storyteller and timekeeper as well for us. So yeah, be very aware, be very, very aware of how life is changing for you over this coming period. I'm excited, and how Venus is putting the bigger story and the bigger picture for you all together. So look, I'm really excited, of course, as everyone has said, to be part of the Costa Rica crew again. What an incredible event. But mostly it's about the raffle. I keep seeing people saying, how do I buy raffle tickets? There's all these links throughout the thread there. So buy your raffle tickets. I am offering, as with the CIA, an amazing, we're having a 5-part symposium in 2020, because there's so much information to share that it can't happen on weekends. So we're having it in 5 parts throughout the year. We're kicking off on the 4th and 5th of January with some of astrology's greatest astrologers. Michael Luton, Kaypacha is one of them. We have Bill Meridian, a financial astrologer, Georgia Stathis, the amazing Lynn Bell, and Ariel Gutman, all talking about different aspects of not just 2020, but into the 2020s. So that is like 5 parts, worth about $600, and then another version of that for part 1, which is $120. So get your tickets. You may win all these amazing prizes, and I wish you luck. Over to Maurice, I think.
Okay. Actually, I'm very sorry to say, folks, that Maurice, I think he's in Africa now. The guy is always someplace else on planet Earth. He sent us a video on Mars retrograde in Aries. Very powerful. I want to share it with you. But first, I wanted to share my screen just to give you a little overview of what we're all talking about here for 2020. And I will be talking about Pluto square Eris right after this video from Maurice. And again, this is going all through the entire year of 2020. It started in 2019, is going on until 2021. And Timothy, talked about Jupiter in Capricorn again all year of 2020. Ari Moshe talked about Saturn conjunct Pluto. It's happening exactly in January, but it's really going to be coming all the way back. It's at least a 9-month transit that Ari was sharing with us. Sol, when she was speaking about Saturn and Aquarius, Saturn, just bumps into Aquarius, okay, for, really April, May, and June, and then comes back into Capricorn again. Christina, she talked about the North Node moving into Gemini. So we have a little bit of a timeline here. You can kind of see things that began in January. Then we've got the Saturn and Aquarius, and coming in later, and then finally this with Maurice, we're going to be looking here at his, Mars doesn't really go retrograde in Aries until much later on in the year. So with that in mind, let me stop this share and share Maurice. That payment. Yeah.
I'm not hearing. Are you hearing anything?
I don't hear any sound.
Oh, thanks. I have to click, I got to click that other button that says share computer sound. Here we go, share computer sound. I'm going to have to start that over again. Thank you. Here we go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Maurice Fernandez, sending you this pre-recorded presentation. I cannot be live with you, unfortunately, because of travel. So a few things. I would like to, first of all, talk to you about some of the transits for next year, continuing what the other members of the Dream Team have shared with you. And as we've already established, probably, this is going to be a year that's very unique, very intense, very different. And we can anticipate a lot of changes, both on a collective level and on a very personal level as well. So it's, as you can anticipate, because it's going to be such a year full of changes and a bit of a whirlwind, it's very important to focus on our spiritual practices, because that's what can keep us centered when our sense of security in the material world, in the societal world is in question. A lot of things can change. We may be facing the unknown. Many things that we relied on can be redefined. So what is the constant? What remains true always is our spiritual connection. That doesn't matter what happens around you. This is something that remains precious. And astrology plays a very important role in that as well. And that's why I think, organizing these astrology events can be so important, because it's a place to recollect ourselves. It's a place to realign, to set our intentions again. And what I like in particular about Costa Rica and Astrology Rising, well, the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and tropical beaches to begin with. But the most important thing for me is that this is not a conference just like any other conference where you go and just study. This is where we experience things more holistically, with this ceremony, learning, community, and it's a week-long process that can take you very deep. So, as I said, focusing on our spiritual development, being in a community of like-minded is what can keep us centered when everything around us is so unstable. So you've heard probably about, what many of us will be presenting. And one of the things I'm going to be donating for this particular promotional event is $250 worth of study material that you can find on my website. Also a copy of my book on the 12th house and Neptune in every house, and then another book on the sun and the moon. So 3 items which I hope will inspire you to go deeper. Now, focusing on what's happening in 2020, you may have heard about the Pluto Saturn and how important it is. But another thing that adds to the intensity and is going to be very, very important and noticeable is the Mars retrograde cycle this year, also in a cardinal sign in its own sign of Aries. Now, Mars retrogrades every 2 years, usually each time in the sign, the following sign. So, it moves from Cancer to Leo to Virgo to Libra. Each 2 years, it's going to retrograde in the next sign. However, it tends to skip Aries and Aquarius. These are the 2 signs that are the least retrograde. So even though Mars retrogrades every 2 years, the last time it was retrograde in Aries was in 1988. That's 30 years ago. So it's quite the event. Now, not only is it retrograde in Aries, which is its own sign and it's rare, but it will be in those cardinal degrees squaring the Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter. So Mars enters Aries on June 28. It starts the retrograde on September 9, 28 degrees. And then it opposes the Sun on October 13, 14. And that's always the peak of the retrograde cycle when the planet in question opposes the Sun. That's the midpoint, that's the climax of the retrograde cycle. And it happens to be a 21 Libra, Aries, and it will also square Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter. Then it goes direct on November 13 at 15 degrees Aries, and it will leave, as it moves forward, it leaves Aries on January 7th, 2021. So when Mars is retrograde, it tends to stay for about 6 months in the same sign, which is a long time. Mars is always a wild energy. It's like a wild animal. It's unpredictable. It can be very creative. It can be very empowering. But at the same time, it can also lead to confrontation, to ruptures, and battles. So, life's not as usual when Mars retrograde. Now, what's interesting is to see how many very interesting people born with Mars retrograde. Look at them. Bernie Sanders, who was also born with Mars retrograde in Aries. Now, remember, the US elections are November 2020. That's exactly when this Mars retrograde business happens. And Bernie Sanders is born in that rare Mars retrograde in Aries. So something very, very important is going to happen in his life because it's a Mars retrograde return in Aries. What I must say is that I hope his health will be strong, because this is, the kind of alignment that can bring a lot of inflammation and potential changes. But it definitely shows him in a fight. So he's in it, he's not just going to sit and watch. He's going to be part of the central forces. So let's watch October 2020 for Bernie Sanders, we can anticipate major radical changes for him during that time. Jim Morrison, Mikhail Gorbachev, Nostradamus, David Lynch, Mozart, Linda Tucker, who's an activist, lion activist, James Dean, Rasputin, all these people, what do they have in common? They're all rebels. They all, did things very differently. And that's what Mars retrograde can do. You can't just take things for granted. You have to forge your own way. You work harder, but you bring a very unique spark. Think about, again, Rasputin. If you know him, he was a spiritual leader in Russia, part of the time of the revolution. And David Lynch, very unique director. No one really matches his genre and his creativity. So what can we anticipate for us? This is the chart of October when Mars will actually oppose the Sun. And as you see, it simultaneously squares Pluto and Saturn. On a personal level, this can be a time where you are fed up. So this is the time where you can feel like you don't want to continue things the way you've been doing them. Mars in Aries brings that need to go solo, to start your own business, to say, I need to dare, I need to try, and I'm not going to compromise anymore. So it's a very radical statement of loyalty to self and no compromise. Now, because it squares Pluto and Saturn, this brings an element of tension with structures and authority figures. So if you quit your job, that can be a time where there can be some contention with authority figures. On a global level, this can lead to protest, where people, just like it's happening now in Hong Kong, Mars is fiery, it's feisty, and it's uncompromising. So this can spread in different parts of the world. One thing we need to be very careful about is that this can lead to global conflict, armed conflicts, war. So when Mars retrograde is often a time where there are political struggles. And because it's in Aries, it can become very physical. Now think about elections. Think about the drama of elections in the United States and how this adds more fire, more fuel to the fire. It will be very intense. That's why we all need to be in Costa Rica, have some margarita, go for La Dolce Vita. Sorry for being a little cliche here, but more seriously, think about how we need to hold a space to avoid this energy, this wild energy, to go out of control. We need to bring it in alignment so that this creative energy is harnessed and used very purposefully and constructively. The same thing must happen on a global level. We can come together, set intention, do ceremony to actually harness this for a positive change. So that's why I'm inviting you and all the dream team to join us in this beautiful setting and do the spiritual work together. This is going to be May 2020 in Costa Rica, the most amazing astrology conference. What I like about this conference is that it brings a holistic approach to learning. We're not just sitting, taking notes. We're doing yoga, we are in nature, and we are in community. So it's deep and it's fun. As we say in Costa Rica, Pura Vida, let's celebrate and make this count. I hope to see you in May. Thank you very much.
Okay, Maurice. Nobody like Maurice. That was really very powerful, and it leads right into, in fact, so much of what has been said today is leading right into my discussion here with Eris. Eris was discovered in 2005, and she is the goddess of chaos and discord. She has a 558-year cycle. That is twice Pluto and some. Very slow, deep evolutionary change. Her orbit goes way beyond Pluto. So she's been in Aries since everyone was born, and she will remain in Aries after you die. She's a slow mover, understand? Yeah. Oh boy, but she is not something to laugh about. And I'm going to explain far more of this in the 2020 survival guide that comes along with the purchase of raffle tickets. I'm probably going to do videos on it, and I'm going to be talking about it all of 2020 at Astrology Rising. I'm going to give the full download. So today I am going to go super fast. I want to talk about the astronomy, the mythology, and then the interpretation of how that fits in our reality. So I'm going to just pick up my pace a little bit here. And maybe you can run this thing in slow motion. I want to share my screen to show you some of the astronomy. And let's bop it out with this right here. You can see, first of all, I want to thank Nick Fiorenza. Yeah, lunarplanner.com for some of these pictures here. You can see here that Eris actually does come inside the orbit of Pluto, okay, but is almost an egg shape, right? She goes out twice, she's like twice as wide as she is far. Like I said, her cycle is 558 years. And the amazing thing is that she is not on the ecliptical plane. You see, this is the ecliptic. Okay, this is where we have, okay, all the planets, Earth, Venus, Mars, Mercury, Pluto's orbit, okay, is a little bit off, but Eris is 44 degrees. Orbital inclination of 44 degrees. So you can see that, she goes far out deep into space and then comes back. She was farthest away from the sun in 1977. She is on her way back up. She was discovered then in 2005. And she is rising, coming across, and she will actually cross the ecliptic in 2075. What she's doing now is this is Cetus, the largest constellation in the sky. Okay, it is the whale. Wait a second, I got a message here. I don't know, I hope you guys can all hear me and everything. Is this thing going right? Oh God, let me check the chat box.
Yes, I can hear you fine. I think
Is everything fine? Can you see everything? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. So she is coming up through the belly of the whale of Cetus, right? Here is Cetus, the whale. And, it has the claws and the paws. And, basically she's coming right up through this sea monster and coming, towards, you can see here is Aries, here's Pisces over, this is the ecliptic that she's coming towards. All right. And I want to give you a little bit about, the scoop here because let me increase this. here she comes through Cetus. And the thing is that Cetus was created, okay? He is the largest constellation. He is a whale kind of dragon figure that Neptune created in order to devour Andromeda. Andromeda is a whole nother galaxy. So here we're coming into this whole, the evolution of our galaxy, of the Milky Way galaxy, of our whole human consciousness. We're expanding outside this little realm of our conscious ecliptic, okay? And she's coming up from the belly of the whale like Jonah, who was, you know, swallowed by the whale and spent years in the whale. And this is the belly of this whale. Well, basically, Andromeda's mother, Cassiopeia, said that Andromeda was more beautiful than Neptune's nymphs and water nixies. And this got Neptune upset. So he said that Andromeda needed to be sacrificed. The most beautiful woman in the world was bound to a rock. And this monster was sent to devour the feminine, devour the beautiful. And here we have now Eris coming up through the belly of this monster whale sent to devour the feminine. And so it's really something here. And I don't want to tell you exactly what happens with the with the rest of that mythology. I mean, I suppose I could. Maybe I could. No, I'm going to say, well, Perseus actually comes in and saves Andromeda by killing the whale, showing Medusa's head, that he had killed Medusa, but he showed her head to the whale and it turned into rock. Now you have to understand, this is the fall of the patriarchy. This is the end of the masculine conquering, dominating, power, misuse and abuse of power. And here we have Eris. Eris is the sister of Aries that enjoys battle. She had many offspring. Let me read you some of them. Her offspring, she had Dysomnia, which is the moon of the planet Eris. It's a dwarf planet. Lawlessness. Another one, toil, forgetfulness, starvation, pain, fighting, battles, murder, manslaughter, quarrel, lies, disputes, ruin. And finally, Horkos, who does more damage than any other to earthly men who swear a false oath. I'll tell you what, she's like the executioner. There may be the judge and there may be the jury, but Eris is the executioner. She's the executioner for all of the misdeeds of 6,500 years of masculine wrongdoing. But if we think that this masculine is just going to roll over and take a spanking, we are very far mistaken. As we can already see, Eris first came into conjunction at 23 degrees, not conjunct, square. The Pluto coming in through Capricorn is squaring Eris. The first time was last April, okay? Then it's coming in 3 times, okay, for 2020. January 26th will be squaring. Pluto Saturn is square to Aries. This is a 270-degree square. It's a crisis in consciousness, is this 270-degree square. She comes, then Pluto goes retrograde June 14th, then goes direct December 10th, then comes back in 2021, August 27th, and then comes back direct October 9th of 2021. So you can see that this is 2019, 2020, 2021, and she is still just rising out of the belly of the whale until 2075. So what we have to understand is that the changes that are going to be birthed, okay, with this Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto conjunction are massive. This is a massive reorientation of what we are now calling reality. I would liken it to when they discovered that the Earth was round. I know that there are a few people around these days that actually want to deny that, but I'm sorry. Okay, they thought the Earth was flat. Can you imagine the head trip when they discovered that the Earth was round and not flat? How about another massive reorientation of our consciousness when they discovered that the Earth was not the center of the universe, but just orbited around the sun? Okay. Now we're finding that the sun is orbiting around the galaxy and that there's billions of other planets, and that, I mean, it's just like, so science is going to just blow our minds. But what I really want to be looking at here, that Maurice touched on, and that Rick touched on, is this whole thing of the patriarchy, okay, the masculine and the feminine. And what we have is Eris is coming up, the Me Too movement, feminism, the powerful feminism is coming up to what? I mean, Eris in Greek mythology, she crashed the party and threw the apple, okay, that said to the fairest, right in the midst of Hera, which represents power, Athena represents wealth, and Aphrodite represents beauty and rapture. She disrupted the elite, the party, okay, the rich, powerful, beautiful people that have it all, have all the wealth and all the power and all of the influence and all of the control. And she blew it up. They started arguing. They could not decide. They had to, and it began the Trojan War. Okay, I'm not going through that whole mythology. You can get it, other places. But what I'm saying is she is a disruptor of the status quo. She is a disruptor of business as usual, as normal. And I'm just saying that we can expect, just look at what's going on right now. We've got the deep state. We've got the dark web. We've got black military projects. Okay, we've got pornography. Okay, I mean, there are more people downloading and watching pornography every month than Amazon, Netflix, and Twitter combined. And pornography is getting more nasty. There is spitting, spanking, hitting, just absolutely defiling the beautiful feminine. And we have the masculine just denying climate change and burning the Amazon forest. You can see that there is just absolute mayhem, and it's going to increase. My prediction now, and I don't like to predict that much, but you can see a wave coming. And you can see the protests in Chile, in Iraq, in Hong Kong. Okay, they're going to increase all around the world as people are fed up with leaders that are absolute in abuse of power. They're impeaching Trump, okay, for abuse of power. This is the abuse of power. This is going to grow, but I'm going to say this is the beginning. This is not 2020. This is a massive start of a whole new reorientation. And what I say it is, the masculine is about this, freedom, but the feminine is about connection. And what we have is an opioid crisis, a drug crisis, a suicide crisis. People are miserable because they're lacking connection, they're lacking love, they're lacking the feminine. And what is ultimately going to be revealed, okay, is that this powerful feminine force of connection, of love, of sacred sexuality, of the divine masculine and feminine coming together, this is what is going to heal the division. But we are going to see a lot more division prior to the realization, because this is what Eris does. She disrupts, she brings discord, she brings strife and arguments and battles until people are it's a shame. But we tend to evolve through pain. And these are going to be some painful years that lie ahead of us. And like Maurice said, it is our spiritual practice. And it is keeping ourselves in a place with an open heart and practicing connection, coming together, not through Instagram and web videos and this and that and the other thing. We want to come together in Astrology Rising, Costa Rica. We want to do workshops together. We want to have full moon circles. You want to connect, sexually, emotionally in a beautiful, sacred, divine union, okay, with others. And it's just, we need to celebrate Gaia. We need to really come together and stand firm and strong for the beauty of the feminine, of Mother Nature, of our home here on planet Earth. And we need to get the word out. I'm glad the North Node of the Moon is moving into Gemini. But anyway, I've probably talked longer than I should. I want to get on to what's going on with, with this whole raffle, this whole giveaway. We appreciate your support. That's, this is one thing, it's costing a fortune to put together this freaking Astrology Rising. And, we're hoping that, people do come, but right now that's, we still got a lot of tickets, man. So the raffle ticket is helping us to secure, the place so that we can actually pull this off and help to bring people together. And so, for my part, what I want to give away is, number one, we're giving away a free ticket to Astrology Rising over $2,000. All you can eat, all you can drink, all the astrology, all the love. I have to mention that we have a very special, amazing guest coming to Astrology Rising. And she's going to be bringing planetary prayer. We're going to be doing more than astrology. We're going to be doing yoga, drumming at the sunset. We're going to be sailing on Mother Ocean. It's going to be just freaking amazing. So we're giving away, for $10, you can get a $2,000 ticket to a life-changing event. And then I'm giving away Astrology for the Soul, the entire course. Okay, it's $1,400. And I want to tell you right now, I'm slipping out the stuff here. We are working on a certification school, the New Paradigm Astrology School of Astrology. New Paradigm School of Astrology is going to be certifying astrologers. And part of the first thing that you need to do as part of that certification program is take Astrology for the Soul. So we're giving away Astrology for the Soul. That's our second grand prize. Then we have our third, fourth, and fifth, and sixth, the 4 modules, $350 a piece. We're giving away the modules for this, okay? We've got 33 winners for this raffle, okay? You've got 33 chances to win. Let me share my screen and just show you, just quickly run through, all of the amazing stuff that you can get with us today, baby. Actually, I'm going to do a live drawing with Laura, okay, on the solstice, December 21st. We're going to get out a hat and we're going to pick the numbers out of a hat. I know I don't know how I'm going to do it, but, So we've got these raffle prizes. We've got the grand prize, Okay, then we've got, the complete course of astrology for the soul. You can see Jules giving away her CIA symposium. I think I'm in that, she said, right? Christina giving away her past life session. Okay, Ari Moshe, giving away his notes, a personal chart reading. I'm giving away a reading. If you would like to have a reading with me, the 4 modules of astrology for the soul. And then we've got, coming in, heart and soul astrology training. Maurice giving away his credit. Rick Levine, a full consultation with Rick, a soul purpose, a destiny. Look at this stuff, you guys. This is really amazing stuff. And you can see this is hundreds of dollars worth of astrological teachings, consultations, insights, awareness, and it's going to come in very handy for 2020. That's all I can say. Soul's giving away an asteroid reading, a gold membership. We've got more flow, with Soul. We've got, Ari coming in with a live session with Ari. Oh, geez, I went so fast. Anyway, you can see you can see all these yourself by clicking it. And last but not least, each one of us today is putting together. Well, we have put together. We're calling it the Survival Guide. Oh, I don't know where that's going to go. Oh, okay, yeah, the Survival Guide, man. We're going to be each talking and expanding upon what we have brought today, and not only say what the aspects are, but we're going to give meditations. We're going to give questions for you to delve into and understand, okay, your own, what this means for you in your personal life. Okay, so it's really going, back into the inner world. And every $10 raffle ticket is going to get this survival guide, which we could say is probably worth more than $10 itself. You can get a raffle ticket just to get the survival guide. I mean, this is the kind of thing where it's like, what is it? Everybody wins. Oh, man. So anyway, I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to bring everybody on here for, a grand farewell. You can put the links on there for the raffle, and let's see, come on, you guys can all turn your microphones on. Here we are. Dun, 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 okay. Come on there, Daniela. Daniela, get your face up there for us to see. Daniela is our administrator, the New Paradigm Astrology administrator. Daniela, the one and only. We all want to thank you for coming today. I don't know if any of you have any final closing words you want to, make. It has to be like 5 words or 10. Anybody?
Yeah, it got light out here and I'm going to sleep.
You're going to sleep now, Rick. Well, I wish you a very pleasant sleep.
Okay, let's all go for it then. All together.
Namaste.
Aloha.
And so
Much
Love.
love.
Costa Rica.
Thank
You
you.
in Costa Rica.
Pura vida.
Pura vida. Live on YouTube.